Valkyria Chronicles is a series of games I hold very near and dear to my heart. I'd even consider myself a fan, however I haven't played 3 and some garbage MMO in Japan that Sega made, using assets from 2 and 3, so I guess I can't say that. Regardless, the first game is considered a cult classic within the strategy and JRPG communities, the second seems to only be remembered by me, and the triumphant return to the good part of the series, in 2018, Valkyria Chronicles 4 got released the same year as huge fantastic titles like Spider-Man PS4, God of War PS4, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Yeah, Valkyria Chronicles 4 didn't do too well comparatively to the other games that came out that year. But as a series I've long remembered in my heart and think so critically of the newest entry, I think it's time to see if Valkyria Chronicles as a series was as good as I remembered it, and if a game that I hated so much back during my first playthrough, Valkyria Chronicles 4, was really that bad. Does Valkyria Chronicles still hold up? Does the second game even hold any water comparing the three? Also, I'll address the rumor. No, I am never going to review Valkyria Revolution. I have chosen to forget that game even exists, aside from the fact that it's important to the lore, but it's non-existent. In my opinion, the game is terrible. Don't play it. And Sega seems to already understand that. And if it ever gets released, I'm not buying it, even to support the series. So Valkyria Chronicles, the Valkyria Chronicles series, are those games as good as I remember and want to believe they are? Or does the series crack with a critical eye? If you are familiar with Valkyria Chronicles as a series, here's a timestamp to get past this part, but for those who aren't familiar with it, here's a basic synopsis of the games in general, going over the story and the gameplay in general. Valkyria Chronicles is set in an alternative version of our world, with fairly similar history, yet entirely different geography, mythology, and history when it comes to the great powers leading up to the First World War, or in this world named European War I. What I mean by that is that most of the major nations in Europa colonized the world. There is a massive continent filled with colonies that led to a great power after an independence war, and the world's Russia, or Rusi, got the short end of the stick when colonizing, getting very little, causing massive grabs for power, and creating more of a militaristic monarchy. This causes a war of expansion between this world's version of Turkey, that is not unlike the Crimean War, that Rus loses in the Valkyria Chronicles world, and Russia failed in real life, which is why they looked. And they in Valkyria Chronicles they look west for more land. In our real world they looked east. I don't even know. Russian history is weird. So in Valkyria Chronicles, the Rusi Empire looks west rather than south for colonies and expansion. Where the histories diverge is when European War I is brewing, where the monarchies of Europa fall to democracy, forming a power bloc, the West European Atlantic Federation, to rival the newly formed East European Imperial Alliance, headed by the last standing monarchy in Europa, being Rusi. War broke out over the scarcity of a natural resource called Ragnite, which isn't really natural. It's complicated. This world's alternative to oil. However, there were a few nations who stayed neutral throughout the conflict, namely the unused for story purposes, unused in the story, other than being mentioned in a student story in Valkyria Chronicles 2, Italia, or Italy, and Gallia, the focal point of the series. During the Second European War, after driving the Empire out in EW1, Gallia, a Ragnite-rich mining country, is a strategically advantageous nation to have control over, whether it be politically, like the Federation wants, or militarily, like the Empire tries, when invading for a second time. This is the sparker of the series, being the second invasion of Gallia. 1 is set during it, 2 is set during the aftermath, and 4 is set from the point of view of a Gallian volunteer squad working for the Federation. The mythology and religion of the world centers around the Valkyria, and an army who nearly wiped out the Darksons, a race that serves the same purpose as the Jewish people for the story. As it turns out, the legends are true, and the major plots are of ordinary men and women fighting against powers far above them that they try to emulate and weaponize, and as the normal humans try to emulate and weaponize that power that they used to worship. Valkyria 1 introduces the Darkson people and how injustice has left them in the eyes of the people, alongside a Darkson Holocaust, not unlike the real one, alongside explaining the myth and showing the power of the Valkyria at its best and at its worst, effects-wise, on the user. Valkyria 2 shows how research and development of Valkyria, natural and artificial, has left warfare between ordinary people and a godlike power commonplace, and the dangers of using such a power normally, while examining how prejudice could lead to rash and harmful reactions, like a civil war, with the primary goal to wipe out the Darksons. And Valkyria 4 is just, oh no, human experimentation, with no real mention of the Darkson people, or the Darkson Holocaust, or people, or the Valkyrian mythos. It really is just a standard war story with some stupid shit. The gameplay of the series is that of an active time strategy RPG. What do I mean by that? As that's kind of a term that only really works for this series. Well, it's a strategy game that uses a third-person's perspective to move your units. I'm certain there's footage of the gameplay in the background to illustrate this, but if you're just listening, here's the rundown. You select a unit, and it moves you to a third-person over-the-shoulder perspective. You have an action point meter at the bottom showing how far a given unit can move depending on their class. If you move in front of an enemy, they will react to you by firing at you. They stop when you activate fire mode, where you can place your shots. You can shoot once per action. However, you can use a unit any number of times, with the caveat that you get less action points to represent tiredness. You must spend one or more action points to activate your units. The only ones that cost more are tanks in Valkyria 1, certain varieties of tanks in 2, and that's it. In addition to orders, which cost command points as well. Command points. You have a limited number of command points that is determined by one set, which is determined with one set number, I believe it's 6, not sure, then added to by officers, which are denoted by a little star next to their name, or little command badge next to their name. When you run out of command points, you must end your turn to replenish them, at which the enemy has the chance to get their revenge. Its bread and butter gameplay-wise is the potential system. Every action you take with a squad member has the potential to spark a buff or debuff depending on the scenario. For example, Elisha Melchiot in the first game and Anisette in the second game both have the potential Mysterious Body that after firing heals all damage they have taken and put you back up to full health. This gives squad members a dynamic with you, the player, as you choose them based off of their potentials. This is far cooler than something like XCOM, where there is no such thing, and soldiers are disposable. The potential system alongside their voice lines will make you want to reset whenever a squad member dies, like dead, like classic Fire Emblem dead. Every single time I've ever had a squad mate die, I have reset to have them, to save them, even if it was an hour into a mission. Aside from Carl. Fuck you, Carl. These games are actually perfect for one specific purpose, putting you in a combined arms mindset. In Valkyria Chronicles, tanks are not unstoppable behemoths, like many movies, games, and TV shows make them out to be. Tanks in Valkyria Chronicles are highly ineffective without proper infantry support, due to the fact that they can be destroyed so easily by lancers and infantry in general. Or by lancers, which are the infantry that have anti-tank guns, essentially. And infantry, due to not being highly effective against tanks, need tank support in order to destroy obstacles like bunkers, guns, tanks, and minefields. Additionally, you only get a few tanks throughout the entirety of the games, dependent on the game, of course. In the first game, you get 2, one of which is you cannot lose. If it dies, you fail the mission. In the second one, you get 1 tank, but it is highly customizable. And in 4, you get 3 tanks with no handicap other than being only able to field 2 at a time. Other thing is that these games have the best level up systems in any strategy RPG I've seen, being that every class levels up together, aside from 2, but I'll get to that. So, for example, if you use a different squad member, they won't start at level 1 and force you to level them up, which encourages you to use different groups of squad members. Also, the research functions in the same way, where you buy upgrades and you only have to pay an upfront fee. You don't need to pay for every piece of new equipment like in XCOM. That should be enough to give you a basic understanding of these games, without me mentioning it every single time. So without further delay. So we're starting with the second game, because it is by far the weakest visually of the 3 games that we look at for the next couple of videos. This game was released on the PlayStation Portable exclusively, because we all know that the best place for a sequel to a strategy game known for massive and detailed maps with a unique art style from an HD console is on the PSP, which is about as powerful as 2 sticks of butter. Well, to be fair, this was at a time when Sega was busy putting all of their B titles on the PSP, and not the expensive HD consoles or the Wii. Stuff like remakes, ports, and, like I said, B titles like Hatsune Miku. It was partly because the PSP was pretty meh-worthy sales-wise here in the West, but it was very successful in Japan. Whisper. This is actually why they forced Atlas and Cryware to make ports of Persona 1, 2, and 3 on the PSP. Shh. Anyways, 2 years into the Second European War, and 1 since the Empire was pushed out of Gallia, and Duchess Cordelia revealing herself to be a Darkson, Gallia goes into a civil war between the Royalists, who stood by the princess, and the Darkson people, and the Separatists, who are discontent with the lack of a competent government, as the court used the dark-haired truth as a way of making the royal family their puppets, and discontent towards the Darksons being treated so equally. The Gallian military was in shambles after 20 years of incompetent leaders, and the majority of the military being lost to the Empire. The major powers picked sides, the Empire keeping it to its treaty and providing military training and rebuilding the army alongside with equipment, and the Atlantic Federation siding with the rebels, providing equipment and factories to them. Gallia proper holds the industry-rich heartland of the north, and with factory cities like Fausen getting back to work. The rebels occupied the majority of the Ragnite mining-rich south, with a base of operations being in Keep Garsenarl. Aside from one strategic point, a 6-point star fort turned military academy, Lancial Academy. You follow Leon Hardens, as he enrolls in the prestigious school in search of answers as to how his brother, Leon, a former militiaman who saw action during the Imperial invasion, supposedly died to rebel forces. You follow Leon as he turns the worst class at the school into a company of heroes. You will follow him through the thick of the conflict, of a conflict not too unsimilar to civil wars in the 20th century and what is happening now in places like Syria. That is aside from the artificial Valkyria. The characters you meet throughout the game, even the antagonists, are great, and barely any of them feel too one-dimensional. They all are unique and have some sort of character progression. Additionally, they all serve a point to the plot, whether that be a playable squad member or a character that is crucial to the plot, or a character that is, a utility character like the drill sergeant or Wilkin and Alicia Gunther. Now, why did I explain so much of the story to you? Well, I'll tell you why, and it ain't gonna be pretty. The gameplay is pretty terrible comparatively to the first game and 4. However, as you go through the game, it will grow on you because which is good because this game has over 100 missions. Although the game developers clearly one thing that I do really like about this game is that the fact that the game developers clearly knew how handheld play is, as missions are only about 10 to 30 minutes long, so it's nice to just pick up and play for a few minutes and then set back down. But here's the thing about this game. This is one of the hardest games I've played. And I played Elmo's Number Journey. This game, on a first run, can seem unfair. But remember this is a strategy game, and strategy games are never unfair. If you think a strategy game is being unfair, then it is your fault. You are clearly missing something that the game is either trying to teach you or is trying to remind you of it. For example, on the mission Darkson Liberation, which is a story mission, you're tasked with taking the enemy base camp, but you are also being attacked by the enemy general, who is a dumb, stupidly overpowered boss. I tried for hours on my first playthrough, but then I remembered the APC, which was able to cut down the travel time between and reach a new area and lowered the travel time by a significant amount, allowing the enemy less time to kill me. There are also mechanics that didn't return in 4, like the armor system. Like in real life, Valkyria Chronicles tanks have very thick front armors and thinner side armors. The game represents that through dealing more damage to the side than to the front. There is also a morale system, which is as squad members go down, or when you lose camps, you lose morale. And if you kill enemy units and take their base camps, you gain morale. And if your morale reaches 0, you lose. This is a brilliant mechanic that gives the enemy an obtainable way of winning, other than just taking your main camp, destroying the escort vehicle, or breaking the defensive line. These added mechanics are really make the game really, really difficult, in addition to the enemy variety, including defense towers, which are the bane of my existence. About these defense towers, they've got a machine gun and a cannon that can kill your tank in like 3 shots. They have the view range of a scout, which means it's 270 degrees all around, basically. And they can take 2 shots to the radiator with a lance and 1 shot to the radiator with a tank. In addition to having bunkers, which are tougher than anything, and a bunch of new unit classes, which I'll get into. In addition to this, every map type has a different environmental effect. Like in the mountains, your squad won't regenerate health because of the cold. Additionally, you are limited to 6 squad members on the field at a time. And yes, downed members count towards that cap. The different map varieties may seem like a drag, because they are all the same maps throughout the different missions, but you will learn where the best place to put your guys in and how to efficiently move through the different areas, and it allows for a lot more time and more interesting missions as they gain more difficulty with new enemy varieties. Valkyria Chronicles had sprawling maps, so how does Valkyria Chronicles 2 emulate this through far less powerful hardware as the PSP? Well, it does this by separating the map into areas that you can move through with the reinforcement camps. In this game, there are three types of camps, rather than just two. Normal camps, a base camp, a transport camp, and a transport camp. The transport camps allow you to put guys in other areas. This makes maps seem far bigger than they are, but it also allows for the game to run really, really smoothly in the third-person view. Furthermore, instead of 3D models talking to each other in the dialogue, with occasional animated cutscenes, it uses a visual novel dialogue system, which is much like Persona 3 Portable. However, unlike Persona 3 Portable, this game used full 2D, hand-drawn, animated cutscenes that are gorgeous and have some of the coolest scenes like the real Valkyria squaring up to the V1s and Dirk.
Whatever you say, Mama. I'm gonna get ya! You're different. What are you?
A few major changes from the first game are the level up / upgrade systems. They added a quote-unquote credit system where you gain credits for a squad mate's participation on the battlefield. These credits allow you to level up your squad member individually through a number of to level them up to different versions of a class, up to for a number of things. For example, the scout is able to turn into a scout elite, a faster scout, then later a heavy scout, one with a grenade launcher. However, or alternatively, instead of going down the scout line, you can turn them into a sniper. However, these credit systems only apply to the one unit. There is a reason for this, because they added a bunch of new classes, and having to level up every class would suck. So they kept the standard level up system, but that only applies to each basic part of the class. For example, if you level up your scouts, your snipers will level up. Or if you level up your shock troopers, your gunners will level up too. This makes some sense in universe as the class is set in a school. But from my perspective, it feels like they got rid of their own great system to make for a ho-hum system. I would have changed it so that once you reach a certain threshold in level ups, you would gain access to the new elite classes. That you could change your soldiers freely into the unlocked classes. Additionally, they changed the tank upgrade system to be weight-based rather than playing Tetris with tank parts. This is because new tank abilities, they added a bunch of new tank abilities, like being able to turn your tank into an APC, light tank, heavy tank, medium tank, or SPG. This could have been adjusted to just make a bigger or smaller Tetris space, based off of the hull of the vehicle and what gun you're carrying. Aside from a few major flaws, this game is fantastic. And if you have one, download a copy on the PS Vita. Or a PSP if that online store is still online, but I'm not sure. And if you can find a physical copy, dust off your PSP and your memory stick, and a memory stick. This game is my second favorite game of all time because of the fantastic story and still really good combat, but lacking comparatively to the other games. A lot of people shit on this game for its story not always being serious, but that's because you have to remember that the Academy is essentially just a high school, so of course they need to throw in some goofy scenes, and obviously they are young people, so they're not going to be serious 24/7. And the other games aren't entirely serious all the time. One example of this is the fact that there's a fucking beach episode in the first game, and there's a mission in Valkyria 4 where you're fighting in a training exercise over bacon. But, like I said, it was put on the PSP, and it didn't sell well. Which is why we didn't get a true sequel to this game until 8 years later. Not counting the third game because it never got released in the West. Okay, so the way that this video series is going to work is that this episode was just Valkyria 2 and an introduction to the series, and the next video will be 1 and 4, because I haven't finished 4, and much less the script for that. So have a fantastic day and a fantastic life. Goodbye.